I can scream. Oh, is that good? Okay. All right. So I don't know where they get those bios from, but I was started at OC in 1998. So we just finished 25 years and quit, and went down and applied for Social Security. So we're going to get rich now. It's going to be great. I keep telling my students, you better get 2 degrees and 2 jobs, because all of us baby boomers, we're going to spend all the money. It's scary. It's scary about that. Muchas gracias para Iglesia de Cristo. Man, when I walked around the corner and saw that was exciting to me. We've been in Honduras since 1997, our first trip, and I take groups. I was there almost 2 months this summer, and we stay at Baxter Institute. It's an institution that trains ministers and sends out teams, and it's a really great place. And then we have several ministries there that we work in, and I love to take teenagers to Honduras. It changes lives, changes me. So I normally make somebody mad, so if it makes you mad tonight, we will have succeeded maybe in keeping that going. There's some sheets right down these rows here in the main church, and so I'm going to give these to Lowell to give to that group over there. And you just need that for later on, and there'll be some extras you can have. I also just translated this study that I'm going to talk about into Spanish, and so I need Lowell or Keith or somebody to give me the minister's name where I can send him. I would love to have a very large Hispanic sample. I think Hispanics do a little bit better in family stuff, at least our families in Honduras and churches there, than maybe we do here in the States. So it's going to be good to have a comparison with that. So I start off sometimes holding this up, and this is a Bible, and I ask my classes if this is true. Crickets. And even for me, when I think about if this is true, and so I want you to actually think about that tonight. If this is true, what's in this? What is really important in life? And then I tell them, especially my ministry students, we're sitting here, most of us know how to tell people about Jesus. You're going to spend 4 years here at this school and a lot of money, and go out and work for a church, hopefully, and do good, and probably not have any unchristian friends, because you're going to spend all your time with church people, that's part of it. But when I think about people dying and going to hell, if this is true, I feel this urgency that we should be telling people about that. A few years ago at Winterfest, we did a deal about evangelism. We challenged 12,000 teenagers to tell their friends about Jesus, that it's urgent. And a young man from Memphis, Tennessee, drove all the way from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, after Winterfest that Sunday, got to his house about 8 o'clock that night, and told his parents, he said, "I've got to go to Chicago." He said, "My sister is not a believer, and I've never told her about Jesus, and so I'm going to Chicago." He got in his car, drove to Chicago. He got to her apartment at 2 a.m., sat up with her, and about 9 o'clock the next morning, he called me and said, "Hey, where's a church?" And so Napierville Church of Christ had a friend there, a youth minister, and they went over there, and he baptized his sister. And so everybody, that doesn't happen with everybody, but he got it. She needs to know. I'm going. Nothing's going to stop me from going to see her. It's a great story. So in this grandparent study that I'm doing, in this research full-time, I became a grandparent, and it's great. Skip children. Just go straight to grandchildren. It's really amazing. But also, and our two sons, they love Jesus. They probably love Jesus more than I do. They're very faithful in their churches and their small groups and their evangelism and stuff. And my son's baptism date was yesterday, which we call his birthday. And, I sent him and my other son a text. I said, I'm so proud of you loving Jesus and loving your wives and loving your children and telling your children about Jesus. My wife and I do that a lot with our grandchildren because that's our job. That's our number one job right now, in our opinion. But they have done such a great job teaching their kids the Bible and memorizing Psalms and things like that. And I'm just thinking, they got it. We did our job right, and they're doing the same thing with their children. Now, when I do this, a lot of times people feel guilty. When I had to fill out the forms with the internal review board, it's when you do research, you have to fill those out to say, is anybody going to get hurt with this study? And so if you're feeding rats and things like that, they might die, or whatever. When you're doing people, you don't want them to die. But I did say there might be some guilt. There might be some anxiety, even depression, when people start thinking about and internalizing, did I do my job right? Because most of the people doing this survey are like you. They're church people. I hope that all of you will do this survey. It's on that sheet. You can just click it and go do it. It takes about 20 minutes. And it's anonymous. It's totally anonymous. So please help me out. And really need you grandpas to step up. For some reason they think, hey, here, sister, do this. And for us, we need grandpas too. So you guys do that for me. So back to this book. In Psalm 78, Psalm 71, there's a deal here about passing our faith on. I'm just going to read just a piece of it. You've probably read it. I'll open my mouth in parables. I'll utter things hidden from old, things we have heard and known, things our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from our children. We will tell the next generation, so that the next generation will know them. They will know God, and in turn, they will tell their children. And so that's a piece of Psalm 78. And when we started the Intergenerational Faith Center, that was the deal, to talk about intergenerational ministry. I was a youth minister 25 years, so been there, done it. I'll have to say this about your church. I always walk through the, whatever you call that thing out there, the foyer, and look at things and all. I am surprised, actually, that I look at the numbers, and you guys are actually giving more than the budget. That's amazing. I know it's Keith's preaching. It's got to be, right? Anyway, but just little things like that, and then looking at all the ministries you do here, and hearing about you from other people in other places, that's amazing. Take care of Keith, take care of Clay, and these other people that you're paying, because there's not many more out there like that. We're seeing a lot of students. When I first went to OC, I would have 40 ministry students in class. 2 years ago, we had 4. Last year, we had 12. And they're not coming to be ministers like they used to be. So I call my buddy at Harding and LCU and ACU and say, how's your numbers? How's your ministry student? Everybody's down. Most kids want to get one of these and have a YouTube channel and make $1 million. They're not interested in a lot of other things. There are some good students still out there that are doing ministry. My point being, take care of your ministers here, because I'm helping 10 churches right now try to find a minister. They're just not out there. So pay them more or treat them nice, give them a barbecue sandwich, whatever it takes. So I'm going to leave this slide presentation because it's about a 4-hour presentation, and somebody said y'all won't stay over 3 hours tonight. So I'll leave that back there, and Keith can download it or upload it, however you guys get your stuff. It gives a little background of the study, and then it gives a few of the what we call descriptive statistics of the first 600 people that have taken this survey at the end of it. But I'll just run through a couple of things. One of the things that got me interested in doing this study was not only having grandchildren, but also I got interested in the cycle that Israel kept going through. We're faithful, we're a harlot. We're faithful, we're a harlot, we're a harlot, we're a harlot, 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 harlot. Little faithful, harlot, harlot, harlot. And I just go, in my mind, I think they saw the Red Sea open up. They saw Jericho, the walls fall. They saw God doing all these great things. I don't know how you could not see Jesus healing somebody and go, well, maybe. I mean, they saw it. Jesus said later on, you believe because you've seen and touched me. The people that believe in me that have not seen me will be so blessed. That's us. So keep doing that. Keep believing. But this is just some charts you can look at closer. You can't read it. I can't read it even now. But this just shows all the kings of Israel and the United Kingdom. The first three, Saul, David, and Solomon. And then it splits into the north and south. In 722 BC, the north, the 10 tribes. We never hear from them ever again. I mean, they're totally gone. That's amazing to me. Obviously, God's promise to put somebody on the throne forever comes through Judah and the southern kingdom. So that's still around. The prophets, I'm doing a study right now on Hosea. I'm teaching that in Hawaii in March. Somebody had to go. And it's a very contemporary book. You read Hosea and you don't see us and how blessed we've been. And the more you get blessed, you don't need God. I ask teenagers all the time, what do you want and what do you need? They want a lot of stuff. On the need part, they go, I just tell my parents. I mean, they don't say, well, I pray to God and hope. I just go to my parents and get. A girl left her phone in the bathroom in Honduras in June. And of course, we tell people, you lay this down in Honduras and walk off, it means you don't need it. They don't steal. It's laying there. I'm taking it. Well, somebody took her phone, and she came out, and she's upset and all, and her mother was there, and she goes, oh, I'll get you the new one when we get home. And I thought, if that was my kid, you get a flip phone that you can buy or whatever. Anyway, but God's blessed us. I mean, think about where we live and we're blessed, and do you really need God? You know, you kind of get into that. And there's a proverb that says, God, don't let me be so rich that I don't need you, but don't make me poor that I steal and dishonor you. So somewhere in there, give me my daily bread. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. We get into that. So I'm going to try to get off of this. We wrote a book called Owning Faith, and that kind of kicked this thing off. And we looked, and I got about 12 guys to write a chapter in there and talk about how they had practiced passing on faith in their youth groups and all. And what we found out is, you know, this thing hinges on parents. It just does. And so we'll talk about that more. And I'm going to run through a lot. Don't even think about reading all these. Let me get to, these are books that are out right now, current books about raising your kids. Nothing about faith. Nothing in these books. And then talk about the elderly, us, many of you in here, if you're over 50. Where do we fit in that picture with our children and with our grandchildren or whatever? And there's books about growing old in Christ and where we've been placed or put in this whole society. But here's a study. It was done in 2005. Largest study ever with churched teenagers. These are the good kids. The number one finding from this $3 million study was that they couldn't articulate their faith. They couldn't tell you their faith story. I got baptized at Camp Wildwood or whatever, and I went on to be a deacon in the church or serve in a ministry. They couldn't tell you that story. So they came back 3 years later, and they gave them $3 million more to go interview the parents of those same teenagers, and they did. The number one finding was the parents could not articulate their faith. They could not tell their faith story. So I have this crazy thing that I'm going to put in your head tonight. And I asked students in my Christian family class, how many of you, your parents, have told you their faith story? It's rarely more than 3 or 4 out of 50. And I just go, all right, you can get your phone out. It won't cost you 10 points. Get your phone out, text your mom and dad, and tell them you want to know their faith story. How did you come to faith? Kind of deal. It's amazing. So you know what I'm going to say next. If you have not told your faith story to your kids, do it. And if you can't do it to their face, get one of these. You probably got one, and video yourself telling your faith story. How did you become a Christian? Why was it important? Why are you here on Wednesday night? They don't count. We already know that. And you're here. You're here. Why are you here? Why do you go to church? Why do you go 3 times a week or 4 or whatever? Why do you do that? They need to know. They need to know why you do that. Please tell your kids and your grandkids your faith story. It's a big deal. Got 2 more hours here. Let me get to a couple other things here. Oops, there's 4. There's my reason right there. We had 2 boys. We now have 4 granddaughters, and they're crazy. And you could tell your boys, go play in the road. Get out of here. And these guys are just screaming with dolls, and it's weird. So my wife and their mother get all the credit. They love Jesus. They love their church. It's great. But the thing hit me about, should I teach 5 more years or do what? And I'm like, no, I want to be with them. I want to be Christ to them. That's kind of thing. I want to make it where my wife can be Christ to them. And so that's important. In the study, the first 600 that we've looked at, and we're trying to get to 1,000 before we really set out and do some statistical work on our sample. But a lot of them, we say, what keeps you from being with your grandchildren? The number one thing was distance. And I get that. I'm 70. I'm taking 2 Eliquis pills a day. I'm standing here shaking. I'm freezing to death, right? In this auditorium. My blood, it's got to be thinner than water. And I'm thinking, Florida, I get it why you would go to Florida or Arizona. It's very warm. We were in Arizona a couple of weeks ago looking for a hotel for NCYM, and it was 109 every day. And I was like, hey, this is good. We've also had 103 in Oklahoma City, so I'm good with that. But if distance is keeping you from your grandchildren, as Sam Kinison used to say, move where the food is. Move where your kids are. Is it about you or is it about them? You have to think about that. And then as we dig down deeper, we find out, well, maybe the reason they're moving away is because there's not good relationships with their children. And there's a thing called the gatekeeper. It's a phenomenon, and we're finding it in our study, that if you've not had a good relationship with your children, they can keep you from seeing your grandchildren. It's happening in our study with Church of Christ, wonderful grandparents. I did a few Zoom interviews, qualitative interviews, and I was talking with a couple, great couple, elder in the church, wonderful, wonderful man. Before I knew him, I knew his daughter and granddaughter, and they're Jesus Christ, both of them. And the granddaughter's been with me to Honduras 6 or 8 times. Beautiful, beautiful people. I didn't even know they had more children. So I'm interviewing them, and I said, how did you get this passed on to your granddaughter? I mean, she is the incarnation of Jesus. I mean, just amazing. And we talked about it a little bit, and I said, well, thank you for your time. They said, well, do you want to know about our son? I said, I didn't know you had a son. I said, well, sort of. Now, think about it. Same mom and dad, same church growing up. Daughter went to a Christian school, son went to a state school. Not dogging that. I've been to a bunch of state schools. But they can only see their grandchildren for 2 hours on Christmas Day once a year. And if they bring presents, they have to be unwrapped because they don't want them to slip a Bible to them or whatever. You know, they're praying that they're alive when these boys turn 18 so that they can talk to them as adults. I mean, but think about that. A grandparent, if your kid says, you can't see my kids. Now, what we've also found out is that the number one thing keeping them from engaging is pride. There's pride on a little bit on both sides, and you hurt me way back, and I hate you for that, and you never gave me a phone, or whatever the reason was, and nobody wants to say, I'm sorry, forgive me. I mean, those are probably biblical things that we ought to do, because once again, you could be, and we're finding this in our study, you could be a link, a very important link to the faith of your grandchildren, and passing that on. You don't want to skip a generation, because like Israel, you'll be gone. So here's some stuff here, if I can read this, of what we're trying to do and what the literature shows. There's the number 3 there, mobility, about the distance thing, move closer or whatever kind of deal. I was talking to a grandparent today, and their grandson got to come and spend 2 weeks with them this past summer. They actually live in Searcy, and he lives way out in the end of nowhere, Oklahoma. But 2 weeks there are pretty intense with their grandson. Was wonderful. So there's about 10 or 12 things here that we're looking at in this study, and you can download this or whatever and read through these kind of deals. And a lot of the questions that we're asking came from some of this literature review about grandparents. And all of this, most of this, there's not very much in the social science literature about faith and grandparents. There's a little bit about values or whatever. So we're hoping, in fact, I got an article published this week. So it'll be in a journal about grandparents and faith transmission. So we're gonna up those numbers. So all of this comes from Psalm 78, and then there's a section here about what we're attempting to do with this study. Find out some what causes this gatekeeper thing. We already think we know a lot about that. The thing we don't know about that we want to try to help grandparents with is what would it take to get you to go have this relationship again with your children? What is it? Is it the pride thing? Is it money? Is it whatever? If this is true, man, I always come back to that. If this is true, what is the most important thing we ought to be doing? I mean, if this is true, which kills me because I play golf, and I think, all right, I got to play with somebody that's not a Christian, so somewhere in that 18 holes I can tell them about Jesus, So I played with my doctor yesterday. He's a Christian, but we had a good time talking about golf and life. So there's several things here that you can look at. There's a QR code on that sheet that you can punch through. So I wanted to leave a little bit of time here to get some feedback from you guys, just see if we could talk. Can we talk? Can they talk? Okay. He's wearing shorts, so I'm thinking probably so. Yeah. But as grandparents for you, what is the most challenging thing to you guys about, and you can tell me in the survey, but we could talk about it a little bit here, to telling your grandchildren about your faith in God? What's some of the challenges in Arkansas?
I'll start with you. Okay, so I have a Baptist friend that my son grew up with, and I was pretty close to him, and then didn't visit him anymore because, we went our ways. And then I ran into him. Everybody good? Okay, so there's a family friend, we weren't close, we didn't keep visiting after our soccer, they went to school and everything, and we all went our ways, and then I ran into him in a local store. How's it going, blah, blah, blah. Well, their son has had some kind of meltdown with faith, and they grew up Southern Baptist, but you caught my attention when you mentioned the son who wouldn't let the grandparents see him, and that situation as my friends, and they were, wanting prayer. We did that, and I know the boy, and I thought about contacting him and going, "What is going on with you?" But he told his parents that they were brainwashed as kids, and he's not brainwashing his kids. So is that common going around the U.S.? Or I thought it was just maybe him, but now you've got interested in, is that a deal? What's going on there?
Think about this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments I give you today, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you lie down, when you get up, when you walk along the way. Put them on your hands and forehead. Put them on the door frames of your houses. There's a documentary called The Jesus Camp. Has anybody seen it? Okay, it's freaky. But it's about a children's minister, Pentecostal, that takes kids to camp, just like Caleb took your guys to camp. I'm probably somewhere this summer. She says, 2 choices, God or the devil. Who do you want your kids to be with? And she pours her soul into, now it's way overboard. In fact, when this documentary came out, they shut the camp down. Because of just what you're saying, the brainwashing of these kids, probably a little toward nationalism. When you put George Bush on the stage and pray to him, that's a little over the top for me, for him to save us, or save the nation. But I show that to my grad students. I don't show it to undergrad. And then we read Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. And my job is to tell my children and grandchildren about Jesus every time I'm with them. We talk about Jesus. We talk about going to church. We have Sunday lunch. We ask all of them what you learned in Sunday school. It's when we die and they stand up and say, well, he gave us a lot of ice cream and told us about Jesus. I'm good. I'll be good with that. So I could see, I hear that, and part of that, I grew up in the anti-churches of Christ. Do I have any brothers and sisters here? Not many of us out there. I hated it because you couldn't do anything right. Everything was wrong, and we were against everything. But I learned all about God in that fellowship. I didn't know God, but I knew everything about him. Later on, we were involved in Crossroads, Boston, ICOC, and learned the urgency of people are dying and going to hell, and if that book is true, you should be doing that. We had little cards, 10 a day. You pass out to come to a Bible study. 1 out of 10 will come. We really got into that. So I hope I'm somewhere balanced a little bit on that, but in the thing that I hated about the anti-thing was that you got to go to Bible school, church 10 times a week, whatever. We had the Willard Conscience books. Did anybody have those? 100 questions every Sunday morning that you fill out straight out of the Bible. And it got pretty tedious about knowing stuff, but not knowing God. So I think the brainwashing part, if you will, is we're not sharing Christ. We're sharing stuff, maybe, and maybe they get tired of that. You have to keep doing it. You have to keep being Christ, I think. I don't know if that makes sense or whatever, but I would tell him to just keep being Jesus to that person. The Holy Spirit has to do something. You can't convert anybody. I mean, you can't. That's the Holy Spirit's job. You have the easy part. You just have to tell them. The Spirit has to do that. One more, maybe, question? We can talk more after that. Somebody else got an easier one? So here's some so what stuff real quick, just to let you know that we are doing something here.
The combativeness of what they're being taught in regular school. The grandkids are being taught things that are against our ethics and stuff.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to deal with.
Yeah. He was mentioning what kids are getting in school, and obviously, wow, that's crazy. And there's a dilemma, you can send them to Oklahoma Christian or Harding or Harding Academy or OCA, and you put them in that bubble kind of deal, but there's bad stuff there. Obviously, there's no sex, drugs, and alcohol at our Christian colleges. I went to Midland Christian last week to play in a golf tournament to raise money for that school, and a guy walks up to me and says, "Hey, you're from OC, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I just retired from there." And I said, how do you know OC? He said, "Well, I went there on a visit to see if I wanted to go there, and we stayed in the dorms with somebody." He said, "I had my first beer at OC." And I thought, oh my goodness, wow. It probably was some Baptist kid or somebody. Anyway, so one of my favorite families is the Barones, and I often think about, do I want to be a grandparent like Marie and Frank, and that whole idea. But Deborah, the daughter-in-law, gets most of the flack in this thing. Guess what? In our study so far, the most tension is between mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws, and which is kind of interesting, and we're finding that to be true in our study, and it's true also in the literature. So mother-in-laws that have daughter-in-laws, you love them. You be Jesus to them. And if you're a daughter-in-law and your mother-in-law's not a nice person, just love her to death, Anyway. Love your enemy. I didn't say that. Yeah. So we're looking at different things here with studying different groups of people, and you can read this. I've got atheists that have taken it, Church of Christ, Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Pentecostals, all different kinds of people so far taking this study. It's interesting. I asked them what church they grew up in as a kid, and so they put whatever, the 450 in the study of that little sample we pulled out were Church of Christ, grew up Church of Christ. There were 62 grew up Catholic. Well, we asked them near the end, where do you go to church now? And it's interesting to see the change in where people go to church now versus growing up. A lot are the same. I found it pretty, the 62 Catholics, only 2 are still going to the Catholic Church. But a lot of dropout in the Church of Christ sample, the Baptist sample, and the Lutheran sample. And so something happens in there. But once again, that's your faith story. How do you do that? We do a genogram in Christian Family, and I have them, you trace a lot of things. It's about not just genealogy, but values and things like that, and traits, family traits. And I always ask them, trace your Christian heritage through there. And a lot of times it changes. I've had a couple of kids, my great-great-grandpa was a Church of Christ preacher, my great-grandpa was, my grandpa was, my dad was, and I'm not going to be one. It's going to break. It's going to end right here. So a lot of different things here. So quickly, there's a bunch of demographic stuff here that you could look at, and some of the questions we ask. And so once again, this is very fast and frustrating, plus you can't read it. There's a little bit about the sample, some questions that we've asked in there, and so that'll give you a little bit. If you're a little leery about taking the survey, get this from Keith or somebody and read through this, but it would be very, very helpful if you would do that. So let's see if we can get to the very, I wish there was an invitation on this, but that's it, kind of deal. So we are going to sing a song, right? And typically in our churches, anytime we're together, we offer the invitation to become a Christian, which I'm kind of guessing in this group we're good. But also this got to be a great church. When I looked at all your stuff out there, and then I see your prayer list on your bulletin sheet out there, and we're people of prayer. Our kids, I love it when our granddaughters spend the night with us, a lot of Friday nights, because we put them down to bed, and we watch 2 goofy animal YouTubes, and then we read a Bible story, and then we go around and pray together. Prayer it's a big deal. And so